I'm Ruby, age 13, and one small lie about being sick changed my entire family forever. I stayed home from school with a fever and accidentally witnessed my Aunt Sarah slipping something into my mother's coat pocket. This created immediate suspicion, especially given the tension already in our household since my parents' recent separation. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had a bad feeling about someone that turned out to be right. Let me tell you about my family before everything fell apart. My mother Diane is 38, my father Michael is 40, and my little brother Tyler is 9. We used to be happy, or at least I thought we were. 3 months ago, my parents separated after 15 years of marriage. Dad moved out, and suddenly our family home felt empty, haunted by silence where laughter used to be. That's when Aunt Sarah, my mum's sister, moved in. She's 36 and showed up with 3 suitcases, claiming she'd stay temporarily to help us through this difficult transition. That was 2 months ago, and something about her presence made our home feel less like home every day. The tension started building almost immediately. Mum and Sarah would whisper in the kitchen, their conversations stopping abruptly whenever I walked in. I noticed alarming changes in my mother. She became anxious, lost weight, and her mood would swing dramatically for no apparent reason. Some mornings she could barely get out of bed, while other days she seemed almost manic with energy. I started paying more attention to Aunt Sarah. There was something calculated about her concern for my mother. Once I overheard them arguing about money, Sarah insisting Mum should access more of the funds, while my mother seemed reluctant. When I asked Mum about it later, she brushed it off as adult business. Meanwhile, I had my own problems. Mrs. Henderson's math class was becoming a nightmare. I'd fallen behind and we had a major test coming up on algebraic equations. The night before the test, I sat at my desk staring at problems that might as well have been written in hieroglyphics. That's when the idea formed. I'd been sick twice already that semester, once with strep throat and once with a stomach bug that tore through the entire 7th grade. A third absence wouldn't seem suspicious, especially if I played it right. I went to bed planning my performance. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual and prepared. I ran a washcloth under hot water and pressed it against my forehead before Mum came in to check on me. When she knocked on my door, I put on my best weak voice. "Mum, I don't feel good," I mumbled, trying to look pitiful. She frowned, coming to sit on the edge of my bed. "What's wrong, honey? My head hurts and I think I have a fever," I said, closing my eyes as if the light bothered me. Mum touched my forehead, and I knew the warm washcloth trick had worked when her frown deepened with concern. "You do feel warm," she said. "Let me get the thermometer." This was the tricky part. I needed to create a fake fever without it being dangerously high. While she was gone, I quickly rubbed my palms together, generating friction heat, then pressed them against my cheeks and neck. When Mum returned with the thermometer, I accepted it without protest. When it beeped, she checked the reading, 100.1. Not high enough for a hospital trip, but enough to stay home from school. "I have that big meeting today," Mum said more to herself than to me, "but I can try to reschedule." "Don't worry," I said quickly. "Aunt Sarah is here. She can check on me." Mum hesitated, then nodded. "I'll ask Sarah to look in on you, but call me if you start feeling worse, okay?" I nodded, already feeling guilty about my deception, but also relieved that my plan had worked. Mum called the school to report my absence, then went to talk to Sarah. I heard Sarah's enthusiastic response. She'd be happy to take care of poor Ruby. As Mum prepared to leave for work, I lay in bed feeling both triumphant and ashamed. I'd successfully avoided the math test, but the lie sat uncomfortably in my stomach. I had no idea that my small deception would lead to discovering something far more sinister. Sometimes I wonder how differently things might have turned out if I'd just gone to school and faced that math test like I was supposed to. Once Mum left for work, I waited about 30 minutes before emerging from my room. I shuffled into the living room in my pajamas, maintaining my sick act, even though Sarah was barely paying attention. She was already settled at the dining room table with her laptop open, typing away. "There's soup in the pantry if you get hungry," she said without looking up, "and take some Tylenol if your fever comes back." I mumbled a thank you and curled up on the couch with a blanket, turning on the TV. For the first hour, I enjoyed my freedom, watching shows Mum would never approve of on a school day, scrolling through social media, and texting Madison about how I'd pulled off the perfect sick day. Sarah largely ignored me, making only brief check-ins that felt more like interruptions to her day than actual concern. Around 11, her phone rang and she quickly took it to the kitchen. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but in our small house, whispers carry. "No, it has to be tonight," she said in an urgent tone. "Her insurance policy is active now, and I can't wait any longer." I muted the TV, straining to hear more. "The kid is home sick today, but that won't change anything," she continued. "The package is coming this afternoon. Everything's on schedule." My heart started beating faster. Who was she talking about? What package? What schedule? When Sarah returned to the dining room, I pretended to be dozing off. Through nearly closed eyes, I watched her check her watch repeatedly, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. She wasn't the laid-back, helpful aunt she'd been portraying. Around noon, Mum called to check on me. Sarah immediately transformed, her voice syrupy with concern, as she detailed how she'd been taking my temperature regularly and making sure I stayed hydrated. None of which was true. After she hung up, the mask dropped again, and she returned to anxiously checking the time. After lunch, a bowl of canned soup, I heated myself while Sarah stayed glued to her laptop. I announced I was going to take a nap. Instead of actually sleeping, I left my bedroom door cracked open, watching Sarah through the narrow opening. At 2:00, the doorbell rang. Sarah jumped up, surprisingly agitated for what should have been a routine delivery. I heard her sign for a package, thank the delivery person, and quickly closed the door. Curiosity overwhelmed me. I emerged from my room, rubbing my eyes as if I'd just woken up. "What's that?" I asked, pointing to the small, unmarked box in her hands. Sarah startled, nearly dropping the package. "Just some vitamins I ordered," she said too quickly. "How are you feeling? Any better?" "A little," I lied. "What kind of vitamins?" "Just supplements," she said, already turning away. "Nothing interesting. Why don't you watch some more TV? I need to get back to work." I retreated to the couch, but kept watching her from the corner of my eye. Sarah took the package to the guest room, her temporary bedroom, and closed the door. 5 minutes later, when I was certain she thought I wasn't paying attention, I crept down the hallway and peeked through the keyhole of the old-fashioned door. What I saw turned my fake illness into real nausea. Sarah was opening the box, removing several small plastic bags filled with white pills. She carefully transferred some into an unmarked prescription bottle, then hid the rest in her cosmetics case. I backed away silently, my mind racing. Was my aunt dealing drugs? Were those prescription medications? Why was she being so secretive? I returned to the couch, genuinely feeling ill now. Should I call Mum? What would I even say? "Hey Mum, I think Aunt Sarah might be hiding drugs in her room." Sounded ridiculous, especially coming from the kid who had faked being sick to skip school. The afternoon dragged on with unbearable tension. At 4:30, Mum called again, this time to say she was leaving work early and would be home in about 40 minutes. Something about the meeting going better than expected. Sarah's reaction to this news sent chills down my spine. Instead of being pleased that her sister was coming home early, she looked panicked. As soon as she hung up, she rushed to the guest room. I pretended to be engrossed in my show, but watched her every move. When she emerged, she was carrying something small in her clenched hand. I kept my eyes on the TV as she walked to the entryway where Mum always hung her coat. With quick, furtive movements, Sarah slipped whatever she was holding into Mum's coat pocket, then glanced around nervously to make sure no one had seen. But I had seen, and in that moment, a terrible certainty settled over me. My aunt was up to something dangerous, and somehow my mother was the target. After witnessing Sarah plant something in my mother's coat pocket, I retreated to my bedroom, mind racing. There had to be an innocent explanation, right? Maybe she was leaving Mum a surprise gift or a note. But if that were the case, why be so secretive? The more I thought about it, the more other incidents started making sense. Last week, Mum had been searching frantically for her pearl earrings, a gift from Dad on their 10th anniversary. Sarah had helped look, suggesting Mom had probably misplaced them at work. The emerald ring from Grandma had disappeared next, followed by cash from Mum's emergency fund. Each time something went missing, Sarah had a plausible explanation. Each time, Mum seemed to accept these explanations while growing more confused and doubtful of her own memory. There were other troubling signs too. Twice I'd come home from school to find strange men leaving our house with Sarah, claiming they were old friends just stopping by. Mum's credit card had been declined at the grocery store last weekend, embarrassing her terribly, even though she was usually meticulous about finances. I grabbed my phone and started searching online about different types of pills. The results were overwhelming and frightening: painkillers, sleeping pills, anxiety medications. Some could be dangerous if misused. Was Sarah trying to drug my mother? The thought was so horrifying I felt physically sick. I needed to check what Sarah had put in Mum's pocket, but every time I tried to sneak to the entryway, Sarah seemed to materialize nearby, watching me with suspicious eyes. It was as if she knew I'd seen her, In desperation, I called Dad. We hadn't talked much since the separation. It was too painful for both of us. But I needed an adult's advice. Ruby, is everything okay? He sounded surprised to hear from me. Dad, I lowered my voice, afraid Sarah might overhear. I'm worried about something happening at home. What do you mean? Is this about me and your mum? No, it's about Aunt Sarah. I think she might be doing something bad. Dad's sigh was heavy with frustration. Ruby, I know the separation has been hard on you, but trying to create drama between your mum and her sister isn't going to bring us back together. That's not what I'm doing, I protested, but I could hear the disbelief in his silence. Your aunt is there to help your mum during a difficult time, he said finally. I know you might resent her being in the house, but you're not listening, I interrupted. Then immediately regretted my tone. Dad had always hated what he called my attitude. I think you need to adjust your perspective, young lady, he said, his voice cooling, and maybe talk to someone about how you're handling all these changes. I'll mention it to your mom. The call ended with Dad promising to check in soon, but I knew he hadn't taken me seriously. In his mind, I was just an attention-seeking teenager, upset about my parents' separation. I felt more alone than ever. Who would believe me? I was the girl who'd lied about being sick this very morning. My credibility was already compromised. I texted Madison, my best friend since 3rd grade. Something weird is happening with my aunt. I think she might be trying to hurt my mum. Madison's response was immediate. What? That's crazy. What makes you think that? I explained what I'd seen. The pills, the secretive behavior, the package, and Sarah putting something in Mom's coat pocket. You need evidence, Madison texted back. Take pictures of whatever she put in the pocket before your mum finds it. Madison was right. Without proof, it would be my word against Sarah's. And Sarah was very convincing. While Sarah was in the bathroom, I tried to sneak into her room to find the package with the pills, but the door was locked. As I jiggled the handle in frustration, I heard the bathroom door open. I darted back to my room just as Sarah emerged. Back in my room, I heard Sarah on another call, her voice low but clear enough. Everything's set. Yes, I planted it already. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Once this is over, we'll never have to worry about money again. The insurance payout will be substantial. Insurance payout. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't about stealing jewelry or cash. This was something much worse. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? My aunt is saying suspicious things on the phone. Would they even take me seriously? And if they did come and found nothing, Sarah would know I'd reported her. And then what would she do? I needed a better plan and real evidence. I decided to set up my phone to record video, propping it on my bookshelf with a clear view of the living room. If Sarah said or did anything incriminating, I'd have it documented. By the time I heard Mum's car in the driveway, my pretend illness had transformed into genuine physical symptoms. My hands were shaking, my stomach churned with acid, and cold sweat beaded on my forehead. The stakes had suddenly become life or death, and I was the only one who seemed to know it. Mum arrived home just after 5, looking tired but pleased about her workday. I watched from the hallway as she hung her coat on the hook by the door, that same coat where Sarah had planted something in the pocket. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. How's our patient doing, son? Mum asked, spotting me. Before I could answer, Sarah emerged from the kitchen. Her fever broke this afternoon, she reported, as if she'd been monitoring me closely all day. I made sure she stayed hydrated and rested. I fought the urge to contradict her lies. If I was going to protect Mum, I needed to play this carefully. I'm feeling better, I said, giving Mum a quick hug while shooting a nervous glance at her coat. Dinner was excruciating. Sarah had prepared Mum's favourite pasta dish and was being uncharacteristically attentive, refilling Mum's wine glass whenever it got low. I barely touched my food, my eyes constantly darting between Mom, Sarah, and the coat hanging by the door. You're quiet tonight, Ruby, Mum observed. Are you sure you're feeling better? Just tired, I mumbled. Sarah leaned forward with exaggerated concern. You know, Diane, I read that children sometimes develop anxiety during parental separation. Ruby might benefit from talking to someone professional. I gripped my fork tighter. Sarah was already trying to paint me as unstable. I'm fine, I insisted. Just worried about the math test I missed today. Mum smiled, clearly relieved to hear me concerned about schoolwork rather than exhibiting emotional problems. You can make it up when you go back. Mrs. Henderson is understanding. After dinner, Mum complained of a headache. Not surprising given the 3 glasses of wine Sarah had encouraged her to drink. You should take something and lie down, Sarah suggested smoothly. I have some new sleeping pills that work wonders. They'll help with that tension headache. No, I blurted out too loudly. Both women turned to stare at me. I mean, aren't sleeping pills dangerous with alcohol? Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly, but she maintained her caring facade. Such a smart girl, she said with a tight smile. You're right, Ruby. Maybe just some Tylenol then, Diane. I watched in helpless terror as Mum took the pills Sarah offered. Were they really just Tylenol? I had no way to know. As Mum settled on the couch with a cup of tea Sarah had prepared, I knew I had to do something. I approached Mum and whispered, "Be careful about the people you trust right now." Mum looked confused. "What are you talking about, Ruby?" "Just check your coat pocket. There's something there you should see." Before Mum could respond, Sarah called from the kitchen, asking Mum to help her find something. Mum patted my hand absently and went to assist her sister, forgetting about my cryptic warning. An hour later, as we were all watching TV, Mum finally got up to get a sweater from the coat rack. As she reached into her pocket for a tissue, her expression changed from casual to confused. She pulled out a small plastic bag containing several white pills. "What's this?" Mum asked, looking genuinely bewildered. Sarah was on her feet instantly. "What are those?" she asked, moving closer to examine the bag. Her surprise looked genuine, but I'd seen her plant those pills myself. She was a better actress than I'd given her credit for. "I have no idea," Mum said, turning the bag over. "They were in my coat pocket." Sarah's head snapped toward me, her eyes cold. "Ruby, did you put these in your mother's pocket?" The accusation hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, you did." Mum looked between us confused. "Ruby, what are you saying?" "I saw her." I pointed at Sarah, my voice rising with desperation. "This afternoon, when you called to say you were coming home early, I saw her put something in your coat pocket." "That's ridiculous," Sarah said calmly. "Diane, I'm concerned about Ruby's behavior. First faking sick to miss school and now making up stories about me. I'm not making it up." I cried. "Ruby, you admitted you were feeling better at dinner," Mum said slowly. "Were you faking being sick today?" I felt the trap closing around me. "Yes, but that's not the point. I saw Aunt Sarah with a package of pills today. She's been hiding things, having secret phone calls." "I was on the phone with my financial advisor," Sarah interjected smoothly. "And the package was vitamins which I showed Ruby." "You didn't show me anything," I protested. "You hid them in your cosmetics case." Mum looked increasingly troubled. "Ruby, were you going through your aunt's things?" "No, I saw her through the keyhole." Sarah shook her head sadly. "Diane, I'm worried. She's spying, lying, and now apparently planting pills and blaming me. This seems like serious acting out." "I didn't plant anything." I was shouting now, tears streaming down my face. "Mum, please believe me." Mum looked at the pills again, her expression hardening. "Ruby, where did you get these?" My heart shattered. She believed Sarah over me. "They're not mine." "Then where did they come from?" Mum pressed in. "From her." I pointed at Sarah again. "She had a package delivered today with bags of pills. She's been stealing your jewelry, using your credit cards." "Ruby, that's enough." Mum's voice was sharp. "Your aunt has been helping us during a very difficult time. These accusations are serious and hurtful." But I recorded her. I remembered the phone I'd set up. I have proof on my phone. I ran to retrieve my phone, but Sarah followed me. As I reached for it, she bumped into me hard, sending the phone flying. It hit the hardwood floor with a crack, the screen shattering. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Sarah exclaimed with false concern. "How clumsy of me." I tried to turn on my broken phone, but the screen remained black. My evidence was gone. "Mum, she did that on purpose," I cried. Mum looked exhausted and deeply troubled. "Ruby, I think you need to go to your room while I figure out what to do about this situation." "But Mum..." "Now, Ruby." As I retreated to my room, I heard Sarah speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Diane, I hate to say this, but I'm genuinely concerned for your safety. Ruby's behavior is becoming increasingly erratic. These pills, what if she was planning to use them on you? Children of divorce sometimes develop dangerous resentments." I closed my door, leaning against it in horror. Sarah wasn't just trying to discredit me, she was painting me as a threat. And from the lack of immediate denial from my mother, the strategy was working. I sat on my bed, tears flowing freely now. How had everything gone so wrong? My mother didn't trust me. My father thought I was seeking attention, and my aunt was manipulating everyone masterfully. I needed help, immediately, before Sarah could take her plans any further. Through my tears, I realized I couldn't wait for someone to believe me. I had to act now. If Sarah had convinced my mother that I was dangerous, what would happen next? Would I be sent away, and then what would happen to Mom alone with Sarah? I wiped my face with determination. There was one person in our neighbourhood who might believe me. Mrs. Patterson, our next-door neighbour. She was a retired detective who'd always been kind to me, sometimes sharing cookies and stories about her police days when I'd stop by after school. Opening my window, I looked at the short drop to the garden below. At 13, I was too big for my parents to install child locks, which worked in my favour now. I carefully climbed out and dropped the few feet to the soft ground, landing quietly in the flower bed. The night air was cool against my tear-stained face as I crept along the side of our house toward Mrs. Patterson's. The lights were on in her living room. She usually stayed up late reading mystery novels, a habit from her detective days of being a night owl, as she called it. I knocked on her door, trying to control my shaking hands. When Mrs. Patterson opened it, her usual smile faded instantly upon seeing my condition. "Ruby, what on earth? Please help me," I said, my voice cracking. "Something terrible is happening at home, and no one believes me." She ushered me inside without hesitation, leading me to her cozy living room. "Sit down, dear. Take a deep breath and tell me everything." And so I did. I told her about faking sick to miss the math test, about witnessing Sarah with the mysterious package the phone calls, and seeing her plant something in Mum's coat pocket. I explained how Sarah had turned everything around, making me look like the unstable one, even suggesting I might be dangerous. Unlike my father, Mrs. Patterson listened without interruption, her experienced eyes watching me carefully. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. "Your brother Tyler, where is he tonight?" she asked, surprising me with her first question. "Sleep over at his friend Jake's house," I answered. "Why?" "Just making sure everyone is accounted for," she said, standing up. "First things first, we need to ensure he stays there tonight away from this situation." She picked up her phone and made a quick call to Jake's parents, whom she knew from neighbourhood gatherings. She made up a plausible story about your mother not feeling well and asking if Tyler could stay overnight. They readily agreed. "Now," she said, turning back to me, "what evidence do we have?" My face fell. My phone was recording, but Sarah broke it. It's my word against hers, and Mum already believes her. Mrs. Patterson didn't look discouraged. "In my experience, people like your Aunt Sarah often leave evidence trails. The pills in your mother's pocket, did she throw them away?" "I don't know. Mum was still holding them when I left." "And you mentioned a laptop. Sarah's been working on it all day." I nodded. "She's super protective of it. Never leaves it open when she's not there." "Passwords can be obstacles, but they're not insurmountable," Mrs. Patterson said thoughtfully. "What about your father? Have you tried telling him what's happening?" "He thinks I'm making up drama because of the separation," I said bitterly. "Let me try," she offered. "Sometimes adults listen better to other adults, unfortunately. Mrs. Patterson called my father, identifying herself as a former police detective and neighbour. I could only hear her side of the conversation, but she was firm and authoritative, emphasizing the seriousness of the situation. After several minutes of back and forth, she smiled slightly. "He's coming over," she told me, "and I think he's finally taking this seriously." While we waited, Mrs. Patterson and I developed a plan. We needed concrete evidence of Sarah's intentions. The pills alone weren't proof. Sarah had successfully painted me as the one who planted them. We needed something irrefutable. "Sarah's laptop," I said suddenly. "She's been getting emails and making calls about insurance policies and payouts. If we could access her computer..." "That could work," Mrs. Patterson agreed. "But we'd need a distraction to get you back in the house safely and give you time to look." 20 minutes later, my father arrived looking worried and slightly skeptical. But when he really saw me with my red-rimmed eyes and trembling hands, something shifted in his expression. "Ruby," he said, kneeling before me, "I'm so sorry I didn't listen earlier." The simple acknowledgement broke something inside me, and I fell into his arms sobbing. It had been months since I'd hugged my father. After I calmed down, Mrs. Patterson outlined our suspicions and our plan. Dad listened, his expression growing darker by the minute. "So you think Sarah is trying to... What poisoned Diane for insurance money?" he asked, struggling with the horrific concept. "It fits the pattern," Mrs. Patterson explained. "The missing jewelry, the strange behaviour, the pills. Diane's symptoms, anxiety, confusion, unexplained illnesses, are consistent with low-dose poisoning." Dad ran a hand through his hair, looking shaken. "God and I told Ruby she was just seeking attention." "We can make this right," Mrs. Patterson assured him. "But we need to act now. Here's what we're going to do." The plan was simple but risky. Dad would go to the house claiming he needed to discuss some urgent divorce paperwork. This would distract both Sarah and Mum while I sneaked back in through my bedroom window. While Dad kept them occupied, I'd try to access Sarah's laptop for evidence. Mrs. Patterson would wait nearby, ready to intervene if necessary. Before we left, Mrs. Patterson handed me her own phone. Record everything, she instructed. Video if possible, but audio at minimum. Dad drove us back, parking a house away to avoid alerting Sarah. As he walked to the front door, I crept along the side of the house to my window, which I'd left slightly ajar. I could hear raised voices inside. Mum was surprised and irritated by Dad's unexpected arrival. I climbed back through my window, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. I listened at my bedroom door until I heard all three adults in the living room, then slipped out and down the hall to the guest room. Sarah's laptop was on the desk closed but not locked. She'd been too distracted by Dad's arrival to secure it. I opened it, holding my breath as the screen illuminated. Remarkably, she hadn't logged out of her email. What I found turned my blood to ice. Emails discussing the plan, references to untraceable substances that could mimic natural illness, conversations about insurance policies Sarah had helped Mom set up, with herself as a secondary beneficiary. Most damning of all, an email thread discussing how to accelerate the timeline because the brat is getting suspicious. I took photos of everything with Mrs. Patterson's phone, forwarding copies to both her email and Dad's. As I scrolled through more messages, I discovered something even more horrifying. This wasn't the first time Sarah had done this. There were veiled references to a previous situation with a close friend whose accidental death had resulted in a significant inheritance for Sarah. I was so absorbed in documenting the evidence that I didn't hear the footsteps until it was too late. The door opened and Sarah stood there, her face contorting from surprise to rage when she saw me at her laptop. "You little bitch!" she hissed, lunging toward me. I scrambled backward, clutching Mrs. Patterson's phone. "Stay away from me." Sarah's carefully constructed facade had completely disappeared. The woman advancing on me was a stranger, cold, calculating, and dangerous. "Give me that phone," she demanded. "No." I backed toward the door. "I know what you've been doing to Mom. I found your emails about the insurance policy and the drugs." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "No one will believe you. You're just a troubled teen acting out because Mommy and Daddy are getting divorced." "They'll believe evidence," I countered, holding up the phone. "And I have plenty now." Sarah lunged again, faster this time. Her hand caught my arm in a painful grip. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she snarled. I twisted away, breaking free, and ran toward the living room where my parents were still talking. Sarah pursued me, her footsteps heavy behind me. I burst into the room, breathless and terrified. "I have proof!" I shouted. "It's all on her laptop. The insurance scam, the drugs, everything." All eyes turned to me as I stood there, panting. Mrs. Patterson's phone clutched in my shaking hand. Mum's expression cycled rapidly through confusion, disbelief, and concern. Dad rose to his feet, positioning himself protectively between me and Sarah, who had stopped just inside the doorway. "Ruby, calm down," Mum started, but I cut her off. "No, Mum, you need to see this right now," I insisted, stepping forward and holding out the phone. "Sarah's been poisoning you slowly. She's done it before to someone else. It's all in her emails." Sarah immediately shifted tactics, her face arranging itself into an expression of pained concern. "Diane, this is exactly what I was worried about. Ruby has created some elaborate fantasy." "It's not a fantasy." I swiped through the photos I'd taken, finding the most damning email. "Look, Mom, look at what she wrote. The symptoms should appear gradually enough that no one will suspect anything but natural causes." Mum took the phone with hesitant hands, her face paling as she read. Sarah changed strategies again instantly. "Michael put her up to this," she said, addressing my mother, while pointing accusingly at my father. "He's coaching her, trying to drive a wedge between us so he can get a better divorce settlement." Dad looked genuinely shocked at the accusation. "That's absurd. I just found out about all this tonight when Mrs. Patterson called me." "Mrs. Patterson?" Mum questioned. "What does our neighbour have to do with this?" As if on cue, there was a knock at the front door. Dad moved to answer it, returning moments later with Mrs. Patterson, who carried a small paper bag. "I had the pills from Diane's coat tested by a friend who still works in the lab," Mrs. Patterson announced without preamble. "They contain a compound that doesn't show up on standard tox screens, but can cause progressive organ damage when administered over time." The room fell silent. Mum sank back onto the couch, still scrolling through the emails on Mrs. Patterson's phone. The colour had drained from her face completely. "Sarah," she finally whispered, looking up at her sister. "Tell me this isn't true." Something changed in Sarah's expression then. A coldness settled over her features as she realised the game was up. "You've always had everything handed to you, Diane," she said, her voice eerily calm. "The attention, the love, the opportunities. Even your perfect little family." Mum looked stricken. "We shared everything growing up. I would have given you anything you needed." "I don't want your charity," Sarah spat. "I wanted what should have been mine from the beginning." She made a sudden move toward the front door, but I stepped in her way, blocking her escape route. Despite my terror, I stood my ground, fueled by months of suspicion and the hurt of watching my mother suffer. Sarah glared down at me, then roughly shoved me aside. Dad caught me before I could fall, then moved quickly to block the door himself. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. Sarah's eyes darted around the room like a cornered animal's. "You can't prove anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Actually, we can," Dad replied, holding up his phone. "Ruby forwarded everything to me, and I've already sent it to my lawyer." Mum was still processing the betrayal, tears streaming silently down her face as she continued reading through the evidence. "The jewellery," she said softly. "My health issues. The credit card problems. It was all you." Sarah didn't answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "I'm calling the police," Mrs. Patterson announced, already dialing. Sarah made one last desperate attempt, lunging toward Mum as if to grab the phone from her hands. Dad intercepted her, restraining her arms while she struggled and screamed accusations. "She's trying to steal my life," Sarah shrieked. "She always has. She doesn't deserve any of this." The next 20 minutes were a blur of activity. The police arrived quickly, Mrs. Patterson's former colleagues responding to her urgent call. Sarah alternated between threatening everyone in the room and pleading with Mum, claiming it was all a misunderstanding. The officers separated us, taking preliminary statements. A detective listened gravely as I explained everything I'd witnessed, from the mysterious package delivery to finding the incriminating emails. He treated me with respect, not as a hysterical teenager, but as a key witness. The medical technicians who arrived with the police confirmed what Mrs. Patterson had already discovered. The pills from Mum's pocket contained a substance that, when administered regularly, could cause symptoms identical to those Mum had been experiencing: fatigue, confusion, nausea, and cognitive issues. Mum was taken to the hospital for blood tests, and monitoring Dad accompanying her, while I stayed behind with Mrs. Patterson to continue giving my statement. The police collected Sarah's laptop, the remaining pills from her room, and other evidence. As Sarah was being led to the police car in handcuffs, she fixed me with a look of pure hatred. "You should have minded your own business," she hissed. "My mother is my business," I replied steadily, watching as they placed her in the back seat. We spent most of the night at the police station giving formal statements. Dad called Tyler's friend's parents to explain that there was a family emergency, but Tyler should stay where he was for the night. He was vague about details, protecting my brother from the full horror of what had happened. Around 3 a.m., exhausted and emotionally drained, we were finally allowed to leave. The detective assured us that Sarah would remain in custody, facing charges of attempted murder, fraud, and possibly charges related to a previous death that would now be reinvestigated. As Dad drove Mrs. Patterson and me to the hospital to see Mum, I was overwhelmed by guilt about my original lie, the fake illness that had started everything. If I hadn't pretended to be sick, I said quietly from the back seat, I would never have seen what Sarah was doing. Dad caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Ruby, your lie may have saved your mother's life. Sometimes the universe works in strange ways." Mrs. Patterson turned to look at me. "You know what made you a good detective today? Not just seeing the evidence, but trusting your instincts when something felt wrong. Never lose that." At the hospital, we found Mum awake, but subdued. The doctors had confirmed traces of the same substance from the pills in her bloodstream. They were administering treatment to help her body clear it, and monitoring for any organ damage. Thankfully, they believed we'd caught it early enough to prevent permanent harm. When she saw me, Mum opened her arms. I rushed into them, both of us crying. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you," she whispered against my hair. "I'm sorry I lied about being sick," I replied. Mum pulled back to look at me, a sad smile on her face. "That seems like the smallest thing in the world now, doesn't it?" As dawn broke. Outside the hospital windows, our family, broken but somehow still whole, began the long process of healing from a betrayal none of us could have imagined. 2 weeks after Sarah's arrest, our lives had entered a strange new normal. Mum was home from the hospital recovering both physically and emotionally from her ordeal. The doctors had confirmed that with time, her body would fully clear the toxins Sarah had been administering. The fog of confusion and anxiety that had plagued her for weeks was already lifting, revealing again the strong, clear-minded mother I'd always known. Sarah remained in custody, denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of the charges. The investigation had uncovered evidence linking her to the suspicious death of a former roommate 2 years earlier. A wealthy woman who had named Sarah in her will shortly before dying of what appeared to be natural causes. That case had been reopened with prosecutors now seeking 2 attempted murder charges. Dad hadn't moved back in, but he'd rented an apartment just 5 minutes away instead of the 40-minute drive from his previous place. He came over almost daily, helping with meals, taking Tyler to soccer practice, and just being present in a way he hadn't been even before the separation. The entire family started therapy, both individually and together. Our therapist, Dr. Martinez, specialized in trauma and family dynamics. She created a safe space for all of us to process what had happened without judgment. Trauma affects each family member differently, she explained during one session, and each of you will heal at your own pace. For me, the hardest part was dealing with hypervigilance, a term Dr. Martinez taught me. I found myself checking the doors repeatedly to make sure they were locked, inspecting food before eating it, and waking up from nightmares where Sarah had returned to finish what she started. But with each passing day, these symptoms decreased slightly. Tyler struggled to understand what had happened. At 9, he knew only that Aunt Sarah had done something bad and made Mom sick. Dad and Mom decided together not to share the full horror of Sarah's intentions until he was older. For now, they focused on reassuring him that everyone was safe. "Why did Aunt Sarah want to hurt Mum?" he asked me one afternoon as we walked home from the bus stop. I considered how to answer truthfully without traumatizing him further. Sometimes people get so jealous and angry that they stop thinking clearly. I finally said, "They convince themselves that doing terrible things is okay." Tyler thought about this. "Like when I wanted to punch Jason when he got the video game, I really wanted, sort of," I said. "But much, much worse. And you didn't actually punch Jason, you just felt like it for a minute. Aunt Sarah acted on her bad feelings." "I'm glad you caught her," Tyler said, slipping his small hand into mine. "You're like a superhero." His simple faith in me brought tears to my eyes. If only he knew how close we'd come to disaster, how many coincidences and small choices had aligned to prevent tragedy. Mum was having the hardest recovery of all. The physical symptoms of the poisoning faded relatively quickly, but the emotional betrayal cut deep. Sarah wasn't just her sister. She'd been her best friend and confidant for over 30 years. I kept going over every conversation, every childhood memory, wondering if there were signs I missed. Well, she confessed one evening as we sat together on the porch swing. Were there moments when I could have changed things, when I could have helped her before she became this? I leaned my head against her shoulder. "You can't think that way, Mom. Sarah made her own choices." "I know," she sighed. "Dr. Martinez says the same thing, but it's hard not to question everything." School presented its own challenges. Word had spread about Sarah's arrest. It had made the local news, though they hadn't published my name due to my age. Still, in a small community, people talked. Some students avoided me like my experience was contagious, while others pestered me with morbid questions. "Did your aunt really try to murder your mum? Were you scared when she came after you? Is it true she killed someone else before?" Madison, true to her friendship, acted as a buffer between me and the worst of the curiosity seekers. "Back off," she'd say firmly. "Ruby doesn't want to talk about it." Mrs. Patterson became an unexpected mentor through it all. Her experience as a detective made her uniquely qualified to help me process what had happened. We'd sit on her porch with hot chocolate, and she'd let me talk through my lingering questions and fears. "Will I always be waiting for the next terrible thing to happen?" I asked her one afternoon. "For a while your sense of safety has been compromised," she acknowledged. "But humans are remarkably resilient. Eventually, you'll develop a new normal. Not the same innocent trust you had before, but not this constant anxiety either. Something in between, a healthy caution balanced with the ability to live fully." Her words gave me hope that the nightmares and anxiety wouldn't last forever. Surprisingly, the ordeal had somehow improved my parents' relationship. They weren't reconciling romantically. The divorce was still proceeding, but the crisis had forced them to communicate better and put aside petty disagreements for our sake. We may not be good as husband and wife anymore, Dad explained during a family dinner, but we'll always be your parents, and we're committed to doing that job well together. Mum reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. That's right. Some families look different after challenges, but they can still be strong. My academic life had taken an unexpected turn too. After everything that happened, I developed a fascination with forensic science. Mrs. Patterson had given me some age-appropriate books on the subject, and I devoured them. The idea of using science to uncover truth and protect people resonated deeply with me now. Maybe I'll be a detective one day, I told Mum as I researched colleges with strong forensic programs, planning years ahead. I have no doubt you'd be excellent at it, she replied with a sad smile. You've already solved one very important case. Most valuable of all, I'd gained a new perspective on honesty and speaking up. If I hadn't lied about being sick that day, I might never have discovered what Sarah was doing. But if I hadn't persisted in telling the truth about what I'd seen, despite being disbelieved, the outcome could have been tragic. Our community rallied around us in unexpected ways. Neighbours organised a meal train during Mum's recovery. My teachers gave me extensions on assignments without me asking. Tyler's soccer coach pulled him aside for special attention when he noticed my brother struggling with concentration. Small kindnesses reminded us that while one person in our lives had proven unimaginably cruel, many others were inherently good. One evening, about a month after everything happened, our doorbell rang during dinner. Mum answered it to find Mrs. Patterson holding a chocolate cake. I thought we might celebrate a bit, she said, joining us at the table. The district attorney called me today. Sarah has taken a plea deal, 20 years minimum. She won't be troubling any of you again. A weight I hadn't realised I was still carrying lifted from my shoulders. We wouldn't have to testify to relive the nightmare in court. It was really over. As we shared cake together, our strange new family unit, plus Mrs. Patterson, who had earned her place at our table, I reflected on how quickly life can change. One decision to fake a fever had set in motion events I could never have predicted. One moment of noticing something wrong had possibly saved my mother's life. You know, I said, looking around at these people who had been through hell together, I think we're going to be okay. Mum smiled a real smile that reached her eyes, something I hadn't seen in months. I think you're right, Ruby. Different but okay. And in that moment, I believed it. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trust once broken rebuilds slowly. But we had each other and we had the truth. Sometimes that's enough to start healing. Have you ever had a gut feeling about someone that turned out to be right? Or noticed something small that ended up being really important? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. This experience taught me to trust my instincts and speak up even when it's difficult, which is a lesson I'll carry forever. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And remember, sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is simply tell the truth even when no one believes you. Thank you for listening to my story. Stay safe out there and trust your instincts.